Welcome. Just one logistical item. This meeting will be recorded, so the closed caption video recording and transcript will be posted online after the meeting. I'll get into the agenda in a moment. However, I'd like to welcome Councillor Wong Tam to open the meeting. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Liz, for bringing us together. I am very happy to be here with all of you. I wish that we were together in person, but given the current circumstances, this is probably the safest way for us to gather and share ideas, to learn more about this exciting initiative. And it is my honor to actually open the meeting, starting with a land acknowledgement. And I'd like to do so by reading and sharing some words that I think is very important as we move through the conversations of city building, but also how we come together to live in this particular city as part of a national conversation around reconciliation. There are many different types of challenges before us as residents of this great city. And when we have an opportunity to do right by it and to do better, I know that we will embrace that challenge with our whole heart. So I'd like to begin by honoring the land that we are on, which is the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. These nations and this land were subject to the one dish with one spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the land and its resources. Other indigenous nations and all settlers, including us, are invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. Today, Toronto, now known as Toronto, is under Treaty 13 and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. And I am mindful of the many broken covenants, and I think that we will all continue to strive to make this right with the land and each other. We're all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, new generations in this generation, or generations of the past. I'd like to also acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And I am so honored to pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. And I say these words not without any feeling or any reflection, but more so in a time of great crisis. The pandemic has changed the way we do things, how we live, and I know that we will continue to adapt. But we have an opportunity here with this particular project called YongeTOmorrow to really reevaluate those values against a current initiative, and that is that every single great city needs a great street. And I think that Yonge Street in particular is not just Toronto's main street, but it is Canada's cultural street. It's a street that brings us together when we are celebrating, whether it's the NBA championship, or perhaps it's a street where we mourn when some events take place that cause us great grief. It's also a street that brings us a tremendous celebration when we host one of the world's largest pride parades, or perhaps concerts. It's a street that defines the city. And it's also a street that's so important because now it is becoming one of the most residential populated streets in our city. It's in a major employment cluster, and it is really the home to so many. So this initiative and this conversation that we are now embarking together as a community, as those who live and work and study and invest in this community, is a tremendous opportunity. And I know that we will spend our time very carefully considering the options and the technical conversation that staff will lead us to. But let us not ignore the land acknowledgement, but let us lean into the conversation about respect and mutual understanding and collaboration. Because this street is not just a street for us today, but it is actually a street for the generations to come. And that's what's so exciting about this project. We have a once in a lifetime opportunity to help shape the future of this community and the city. And I know that everyone will be paying attention. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And those are wonderful words to start this meeting, this very important meeting. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. This is the third public meeting for YongeTOmorrow, and of course, this one is virtual, so it looks and feels a little bit different than the meetings we've had in the past. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to explain the agenda as well as how to participate in a moment. But first, my name is Liz McCarty. I'm with a firm called Laura Consulting, and I will be your independent facilitator for our event this evening. My job, of course, is to make sure that we have a great meeting, lots of conversation, interesting questions, and of course, to make sure that we write a report and capture everything that you're saying. We know that some people have submitted questions before, and we will be working to integrate that into our conversation. We'll also be offering an opportunity for people to ask questions either on the phone or through their laptops or through the Q&A function, and I'll explain that in a minute. So we will also be offering you an opportunity after this meeting to provide us with comments or fill in our questionnaire until September 30th. Co-facilitating with me tonight is Magosha Pijer from the City of Toronto Public Consultation Unit. So we will work you through how the conversation is going to flow after that. The purpose tonight, though, is to present to you the design for Yonge Street between College Street and Queen Street and to seek your feedback and get your ideas. Your responses today and over the next month up until September 30th will be to inform the final design that is presented to City Council. So it's great that you were able to attend tonight, so thank you. Our agenda tonight, we'll start with introductions in a moment from the project team, and you'll hear presentations from Joanna Kite from Transportation Services with the City of Toronto, Peter Piet and Andy Barker from the Steer Group. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we'll have the opportunity for you to ask questions. We'll get to as many questions as we can tonight. And if we can't get to your questions tonight, you will have an opportunity to have those answered through the meeting summary that we will be prepared. So with that, I'd like to introduce the team to you. The first person will be Joanna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Kite, and I'm the project manager from Transportation Services leading the YongeTOmorrow EA study.
Peter.
Hi, my name is Peter Piet, and I'm a technical director at Steer, where I focus on street design.
Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Barker from Steer. I'm looking after the civil engineering aspects of the project.
Magosha.
Magosha Pijer, City of Toronto. I am the public consultation coordinator for the project and truly excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
Right on. David.
Hi everyone, I'm David Satanta with Steer. I'm a transportation planner. Thanks.
Jordan.
Hi there, I'm Jordan Talker from Steer. I'm also a transportation planner. Thanks.
Angie. Angie.
Hi there, I'm Angie Ning with Steer Group and I'm the project coordinator.
Carol.
Hi everyone, I'm Carol Sang. I'm from the Public Consultation Unit at the City of Toronto.
Ryan.
Hello, I'm Ryan Adamson with Laura Consulting and I'm a community engagement coordinator.
And Jacqueline.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacqueline Hayward. I'm the Director of Project Design and Management for the City of Toronto in Transportation Services.
Awesome. Thanks so much, team. So before we get started into the presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about how our meeting's going to work. So we can just go to the next slide. So in terms of our code of conduct, of course, we want to make sure that everyone is respectful. The City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization, and racist or other forms of discriminatory, prejudicial, or hateful comments and questions will not be tolerated, and you will be removed from the meeting. One voice at a time. Be direct and frame questions to specific speakers. When you ask your question, please be brief and limit yourself to one question and comment at a time. Of course, be a good listener and keep an open mind. So I'm going to go through the WebEx basics of how to participate in the questions and answers after the presentation. So the first will be some folks on the phone. So once we get through the presentation, we'll open up the question and answer session. And if you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. If we call on you, Magosha or myself, we will mention the first few digits of your phone number, and then we will unmute you. You'll be able to ask your question. And once you've asked your question, please raise or press *3 to put your hand down. For smartphones or tablets, we will be focusing in on questions two ways. One is you will be able to ask a verbal question by raising your hand. So under the participant list and your name, you will see a hand icon. Just press that and it'll show that your hand is up. And if we call on you, then what we will do is take you off mute. You'll be able to ask your question. And then if you can, press that hand icon to put your hand down. We'll also be accepting questions through the Q&A function or to submit a typed question. So underneath your picture, there are 3 dots. You can see the laser pointer there, the 3 dots. If you click on there, you can see the question mark box. Click on that and you'll be able to submit your question. Again, because you've submitted the question by writing, what we will do is we will read out your question and then one of the project team members will respond to it. For your laptop or your desktop, the process is similar to what I just described. So we will take questions through the Q&A panels, or you'll be able to ask a question by raising your hand using the hand icon. That's similar to what I just described on the tablet. So once the presentations are finished, and we'll move to that in a moment, we will begin to take questions. As I mentioned, there were also folks who submitted questions in advance, and we will bring those into the conversation as well. I look forward to hearing your questions. Joanna.
All right, hi everyone, welcome. So as I mentioned before, I'm Joanna Kite and I'm the project manager from Transportation Services. And later I will hand the presentation over to Peter and Andy. For those of you who've already watched the public briefing presentation online on the website, bear with us as we go through a slightly shorter version of that presentation tonight. Please note that many of the images that you will see tonight were created before COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. So the City of Toronto has been studying ways to increase pedestrian space and improve the way people move through and experience Yonge Street between College, Carlton Streets and Queen Street. YongeTOmorrow is a municipal class environmental assessment. This is the 3rd round of public consultation and your feedback will inform the plans presented to City Council for consideration in December. Over the past 7 months, COVID-19 has changed how many Torontonians use and prioritize space on city streets. And under the direction of council, lane closures and other changes to city streets have been installed as part of the active TO, cafe TO, and curb TO programs to support social distancing. The City of Toronto is monitoring these temporary installations to identify challenges and opportunities in the short and long term. YongeTOmorrow has also asked stakeholders how their use of the street and priorities have changed in 2020 and has considered that feedback. The YongeTOmorrow study continues to evaluate concepts by considering the needs of people using the street today and many years from now in a post-pandemic future. Both short and long term, YongeTOmorrow will support more space for people walking and cycling, more space for outdoor cafes, on-street vending and retail, improving equity and experience for those who walk, roll, cycle, and take transit, and more public space for residents in the core with less access to parks and private outdoor spaces. The YongeTOmorrow EA is the first phase of study on Yonge Street, and the focus area is evaluating design concepts on Yonge Street from College Carlton Street to Queen Street. After YongeTOmorrow is complete, a second phase of the EA will commence, and that will look at design concepts on Yonge Street from Davenport Road to College Carlton Street. First, we'll go over a recap of some of the key drivers informing the YongeTOmorrow study. There's a 100-year-old water main beneath Yonge Street, and the road was last reconstructed in the 1950s when the subway was completed, and that is soon going to need replacing. And this construction provides us with an opportunity to reconsider a street, the needs of everyone using the street, both short and long term. There are more people choosing to walk, cycle, and take transit than ever before in the downtown core. Based on the city's intersection counts, the majority of people using Yonge Street are walking, cycling, or taking transit. And the current population and employment in the downtown core are expected to double by 2031. The city's official plan also identifies Yonge Street as a cultural corridor and a priority retail street that should be improved for walking, transit use, cycling, social gathering with space for seating, cafes, and greening. YongeTOmorrow also supports the Vision Zero Road Safety Action Plan to prioritize the safety of vulnerable road users. YongeTOmorrow will also support improving transportation choices and experiences for all who walk, roll, cycle, take transit, and provide more public space for downtown residents. Now let's recap how we got to round 3 of consultation. At Public Event 1, 15 possible street design options and a set of evaluation criteria were developed. The long list of 15 street design options were evaluated, and a short list of 3 street design options emerged as best meeting the project objectives. They were pedestrian priority, one-way driving access, and two-way driving access. The short list of street design options recommended that a separated cycling facility be located on a parallel street. Bay Street, Church Street, and University Avenue were identified for a cycling facility feasibility assessment. At Public Event 2, we presented the 4 alternative solutions that were developed by applying one of the 3 street design options, pedestrian priority, one-way, or two-way, to each block of Yonge Street based on its local needs. Alternative 4, with cycling facilities on University Avenue, was identified as the preliminary preferred alternative. In round 1 and 2 of consultation, over 6,000 online survey responses were received, and over 50 individual meetings were held with key stakeholders. After round 2, the key themes heard were pedestrian experience is a top priority on Yonge Street, increased consideration for cycling, deliveries, and ride hailing is desired, maintain space for on-street retail and patios, and consider a phased implementation. The alternative 4 pedestrian priority zones, especially the sections between Edward Street and Dundas Square, received a lot of public support. Comments were mixed about the other blocks which incorporated driving access. Round 2 of feedback and modeling results confirmed that alternative 4 as the preferred alternative solution. Feedback also indicated that more consideration was needed for cycling, loading, deliveries, and ride hailing. Keeping this feedback about cycling and more driving access to support businesses in mind, Alternative 4 was then developed into 3 design concepts. Before Peter comes in to tell you more about the design concepts, we received a lot of questions about pedestrian priority zones in round 2. So let's go over just what exactly is a pedestrian priority zone. So this is an area dedicated to walking and cycling where motor vehicles would be restricted during the daytime from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. using gate. Cycling that yields to pedestrians is encouraged in pedestrian priority zones. There would be traditional sidewalks on each side of the pedestrian priority zone for pedestrians only. And the pedestrian priority zones have been designed to maintain access for all east-west, across all east-west streets, maintain access to all driveways, loading docks, laneways, and parking garages, for emergency services, and for continued overnight bus service and use of the road by cars and trucks. Now I'll pass things over to Peter.
Thanks, Joanna. Hi, Peter here again. I'm now going to give you a quick summary of the design concepts and then walk you through the recommended concept in more detail. This summary shows how different operations have been applied by block during the day to form the 3 design concepts. Different operations were needed to address the varying needs and conditions by block between College Street and Queen Street. All concepts would include a cycle track on University Avenue, from College Street to Adelaide Street and allow two-way driving access overnight from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. for buses, cars and trucks. Tonight, we will focus on 4C because it has been identified as the recommended design concept. It balances the priorities of people walking, cycling, taking transit and accessing local properties by car or truck. Although operations vary, the physical space, that is the road width, curbs and paving materials, are the same from College Street to Queen Street to create a consistent look and feel. Changes between blocks are operational, not physical. This means the design is flexible and the operation of any block can be changed to meet Toronto's future needs. All blocks allow cycling, have wide sidewalks and furnishing zones to accommodate space for walking, cafes, street furniture and greening, and provide two-way driving access overnight between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. for buses, cars and trucks. By flanking each pedestrian priority zone with one-way streets, access is maintained, but traffic volumes are kept low to create a pedestrian-friendly environment similar to the pedestrian priority zones all the way from Gerrard Street to Shooter Street. Now, let's have a look at each section, block section in more detail. College Street to Gerrard Street features two-way driving access with cycle tracks. Cycle tracks have been added to the recommendations for this block because it has a wider right-of-way, lower pedestrian volumes, higher vehicular volumes, and provide links to the existing cycle network. Unit paving, a 30 km/h speed limit, and no through travel south of Gerrard Street during the day would calm traffic. 4C also provides curbside activity areas on both sides of the street because there is a lot of ride-hailing and deliveries on this block. A signalised pedestrian crossing would connect College Park and the McGill Street Parkette. Gerrard Street to Walton Street features one-way driving access. Northbound local access has been added to the recommendation for this block during the day to provide more support for deliveries and ride-hailing on Walton Street and Yonge Street. The volume and speed of vehicles using this block would be very low to support a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. The character of this section would be similar to the pedestrian priority zones. Walton Street to Elm Street features a pedestrian priority zone. The recommendation for this block stayed the same because it has high pedestrian volumes and more development is planned. Gates would close the road from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. and open overnight to allow access for buses, cars and trucks. Sidewalks on each side of the road would remain for pedestrians only and are flanked by furnishing zones to support cafes, planting and seating. Curbside activity zones are provided on Elm Street to allow space for deliveries and ride-hail during the day. Elm Street to Edward Street features one-way driving access. Local southbound access was added to the recommendation for this block during the day to provide more support for deliveries, ride-hailing, and to service loading docks access from Gould Street. The volume and speed of vehicles using this block would be very low to support a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. The northbound lane wouldn't have any cars or trucks during the day and can be used for cycling. Drivers would travel eastbound on Elm Street to enter Yonge Street and exit by travelling west on Edward Street. Gould Street remains two-way to support laneway activities. Curbside activity areas are provided on Edward Street and Elm Street to allow space for deliveries and ride hail. Edward Street to Dundas Street and Dundas Street to Dundas Square would feature pedestrian priority zones. These blocks stayed the same because they have the highest pedestrian volumes, high east-west pedestrian traffic, and special events. Curbside activity zones are provided on Edward Street and Dundas Square to allow space for deliveries and pick-up, drop-off during the day. Pedestrians would be able to access east-west at any time, so the diagonal scramble crossing would be eliminated from the Yonge-Dundas intersection. This would improve east-west travel times on Dundas Street for transit riders and drivers. The operation of Dundas Square to Shooter Street features one-way driving access. The recommendation for this block stayed the same, providing northbound local access and lots of curbside activity space on the east side. This is because this block has the most ride-hailing and tour bus use, supporting tourism and entertainment activities. The operation of Shooter Street as a two-way street, Dundas Square eastbound only and O'Keefe Lane northbound only, would remain unchanged. This block also provides access to Green Pea parking on Dundas Square. The southbound lane would not have any cars or trucks during the day and can be used for cycling. Shooter Street to Queen Street would have two-way driving access. This block stayed the same because two-way driving access connects parking, garages and tourism sites to major routes in and out of the downtown, limiting traffic congestion. This block also has lower pedestrian volumes. Curbside activity zones would be provided to support properties without rear access and also provide for pick-up, drop-off for the theatre. Turning right out of the Eaton Centre parking garage would be allowed, and the traffic signal would allow pedestrians to cross first. Turn restrictions would be maintained at Queen Street and Yonge Street intersection with increased space for pedestrians. I shall now pass you over to my colleague, Andy Barker.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, Andy Barker here. I'm going to walk you through some of the impacts and the evaluation results for the recommended design concept 4C. Looking at cycling, cycling will be permitted along the full length of Yonge Street between College Street and Queen Street, including the pedestrian priority zones. More consideration for cycling has been added to the recommended design concept by providing a cycle track on Yonge Street between College Street and Gerrard Street. On blocks with one-way driving access, cyclists would share the space as well as being permitted in the lane in the opposing direction. Eliminating through traffic and reducing driving lanes on Yonge Street means that it will feel more like a local street. People cycling will benefit from the reduced vehicle volumes and speeds. Because of the high pedestrian volumes, frequent events, tourism sites sharing the limited space on Yonge Street south of Gerrard Street, a separated high-volume cycling facility is recommended on University Avenue from College Street to Adelaide Street. Impacts to driving across the neighbourhood have been estimated using a traffic simulation model. The highest impacts are seen in the northbound direction on Bay Street and Church Street, which have increases of 90 seconds and 120 seconds respectively. Impacts to driving on east-west streets are much lower. The highest increase in travel time is seen on Queen Street, which has an increase of 40 seconds westbound. B bus that currently uses Yonge Street during the day would be discontinued or rerouted. No changes are recommended to other daytime bus services or the 320 night bus. Subway replacement shuttle buses, streetcar routes and subway services would also be unchanged. Looking at some of the travel time estimates, buses on Bay Street see the highest increase in travel time of 80 seconds in the northbound direction. In the westbound direction, Queen Street has the highest increase in transit time at 40 seconds. A detailed evaluation has been completed for the three design concepts, and here is an overview of the differences between 4A, 4B and 4C and how well they achieve the evaluation criteria. 4A scored the highest in all of the categories related to pedestrian friendliness and positive street experience due to the high amount of pedestrian priority areas and furnishing or planting zones. For the same reasons, 4A also scored the lowest in driving and transit. 4B had the opposite results to 4A, scoring highest in driving and transit and lowest on categories related to the pedestrian experience. Both 4A and 4B scored lower in cycling than 4C because they provide more space to support either the pedestrian experience or driving access. 4C best achieves the priorities of people moving through and experiencing Yonge Street across all modes. Okay, I'll now hand you back to Joanna for the conclusion of the presentation.
Hi there, everyone. So the project team is going to continue gathering feedback from the public until the end of September. And then we will be putting together a recommended design concept, which we will present to Infrastructure and Environment Committee. And then that it will go on to City Council. And once City Council comes to a decision, we will then submit to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. It will be open for a 30-day public review period. And then hopefully a project will go on for implementation. So we want everyone to get involved and to let everyone else in your networks know that they should also get involved. And so you can go to the website, which is toronto.ca/YongeTOmorrow. So you can read more consultation material online. You can go over the briefing panels and you can rewatch a briefing presentation. And then also complete the online questionnaire to give us your feedback. And you can also subscribe on the website to project updates, and you can hear about when events will be happening with Council, with Infrastructure Environment Committee, and you can also sign up for updates with the Councillor's office to hear what's going on in their office related to the project as well. So that concludes the presentation portion, and I'm going to hand you back to Liz.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Joanna, Peter, and Andy. So now we're going to move into the questions portion of the event this evening. We have until about 8 o'clock to do so. And as I mentioned, Magosha and myself will be helping to work through the questions. Just as a reminder, there are 3 ways that people have been able to submit questions. So you could submit questions in advance. And we'll be bringing some of those into the conversation. Also, you can raise your hand if you're on the phone or on your desktop, laptop, or smartphone. You can raise your hand by pressing the raise hand icon underneath the participants list to the left, and we will get to those questions and you will be live to ask your question. If you're on the phone, to raise your hand, it's *3. So we'll go through the participant list as well. And also you can submit a typed question and we will read those out. Again, I mentioned we'll try to get to as many questions as possible tonight. If we can't get to all of the questions, we will work to answer the questions in the meeting summary report. If we do call on you, what I will do is say your name, or if you're on the phone, the first 3 digits of your phone number, unmute you, and then so you can ask your question and then mute you again. So the first questions we're going to go to are the questions that we received, or some questions that we received in advance. So Magosha, why don't you tell us some of those questions?
Sure, thanks, Liz. So let's start with the topic of explain design. We've got one question: why does the design change on each block? Question 2: won't this be confusing for drivers?
Okay, so I'm going to pass the first question to Peter to talk about the design, and then I'll talk about the drivers understanding the recommended design concept.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. I think, why does the design change on each block? Well, I think we need to differentiate between physical design and operations. The physical design, things like the width of the road, sidewalk, and the furnishing zones, materials and curbs are consistent throughout all of the blocks. So the street will actually look the same. Therefore, the physical design does not differ much from block to block. However, what does change from block to block is the operation, one-way, two-way, pedestrian priority, because they're basically varying needs between College Street and Queen Street based on adjacent properties and how people use the street. Thanks, Joanna.
And in terms of understanding and drivers navigating through the downtown. So the design is meant to reduce the number of motor vehicles on Yonge Street and improve the experience for walking and cycling. And so the intent of the design concept is to eliminate Yonge Street as a way to get across the downtown. But the design supports people in cars and trucks accessing properties on Yonge Street, but not passing through. And so things like signage, physical design cues, and working with wayfinding apps will help people to navigate to and from their destination on Yonge Street. We can go to our next question, Magosha.
Sure. Let's go to actually a question that's come up with the question panel. So this design discriminates against disabled people. I can't walk and require someone to drive me and drop me off in front of the desired location. The changes being made to the city make life more difficult for people who can't walk or use a bicycle.
Okay, so the intent of the design is to try and incorporate access for multiple modes. And so what we've done is we've added in the blocks that have one-way or two-way access to really limit the amount of distance that vehicles cannot access individual properties. And so we've worked closely with Wheel-Trans to come up with the extent of the pedestrian priority zones and figure out how those he needs services such as Wheel-Trans or other pickup drop-off services to access their destinations. And so as we continue to work through design in the next phases, we'll also be working with Wheel-Trans to continue to understand if there are particular properties where we need to make additional accommodations for Wheel-Trans to service folks properly to get to their destinations. So that's something that we're very mindful of. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is that there are many properties within the pedestrian priority zones that have many front doors on other streets, such as sites like the Eaton Center, Atrium on Bay, and Ton Dundas. So we're doing our best to work with our colleagues in Wheel-Trans and understand the needs of folks who use pickup drop-off services and services like Wheel-Trans.
Thanks, Joanna. Liz, how about we go over to you if you want to take a hand up that I see in the attendee list. Liz, you're on mute.
Thank you.
You're
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the order of people who've asked questions with their hands up. So as a reminder, what I'll do when I call on your name is I'll unmute you so you can ask your question. So I think there's a question here from Talia. Talia, please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
Hopefully this is appropriate in the sense that I'm not going sort of way beyond what you guys can talk about this evening, but I'll ask if you can tell me. Just as a person who really only walks and I don't own a car, I found that there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of what belongs on bicycle lanes and sidewalks with all kinds of new, there's motorized skateboards and bicycles that are motorized. I see people who are on scooters that are quite large going on the sidewalk very fast, and I'm frankly feeling quite uneasy downtown walking around. I feel almost safer on the street than I do in the sidewalks these days, and I'm too scared to go on the bike lanes with my own bike. because there's just sort of a little bit of chaos. So I'm wondering if those are going to be more defined and by the city, so you know who's supposed to be where.
Yep. Okay. Great, Talia. That's a great question. I'm going to pass it over to Joanna.
Thanks.
So the city is working on, there are other policy projects outside of this project that are working on micromobility and how that affects the use of our streets. And I'll ask Jacqueline Hayward, she may have some additional comments she would like to make about policy that's being developed on a transportation-wide and a city-wide policy with respect to micromobility, e-scooters, things like that. And if Jacqueline's not on the line right now.
Thanks, Joanna.
Oh,
yeah,
she's
I'm
here.
here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was. Hi, everyone. The question about the different types of mobility choices that residents of our city have is rapidly evolving. We are looking at our policies on this issue. E-scooters, for example, the stand-up scooters that you can kick but also have an electric motor. Those are not a legal device to be used on sidewalks or streets in the city of Toronto. And so we are looking at the ways that we can better inform the public and regulate devices like that to make sure that spaces that are intended for pedestrians are used by pedestrians only.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. And as a reminder, for those that have asked your question, if you could press the hands up icon so your hand goes down, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to go to Danny now. Danny, I want to open it up so you can ask your question.
Yeah, hello. Oh, am I on mute?
Nope, you're good.
I'm unmuted. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Liz, and thank you all. Thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to ask a question. And just a quick observation, a quick question. One observation is, as a lawyer, I'm always cautious of this and sometimes guilty of it, is things that make a lot of sense to me as I dig down into the weeds, they can get over-engineered, and then they can just be too complicated for people to deal with. And sometimes I get the impression the way this is working out is that it just will be way too complicated for people to understand how the street works. Just an observation. My second question is, it seems like option 4B was dismissed. And my question there is just obviously with living in Canada and the weather conditions with winter really impacting a lot of how we commute, and with cars and especially the movement to electric cars, which are going to be much more environmentally friendly, have we given enough consideration to option 4B, which seems to at least give opportunity and space for all types of transportation, considering all of the factors that we live with, weather-wise, technology-wise, and still needing to get around in the city of Toronto using all those means. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Over to Joanna.
So I think the thing that I'll point out is that we've done a lot of data collection on this project, and Yonge Street has extremely high pedestrian volumes throughout all months of the year, all days of the week. And that is what is supporting the decisions surrounding pedestrian priority zones on Yonge Street, is the high volume of pedestrians that are using Yonge Street, especially near the Yonge and Dundas intersection in summer, fall, winter, and spring.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joanna. Okay, Magosha, I see lots of questions coming through the Q&A chat. So why don't you just read off a couple of those?
Sure. And I just want to, I do have, there's some comments about, I've asked my question in the beginning, when are you going to get to me? And we are trying very hard to get to as many questions as we can. Nobody can see the background of what's going on here, but I've got like topics and themes and columns. So we've moved from explaining the design, and now we're going to move to the topic of cycling. So this is from our question panel. Can you talk about what will be done to avoid seeing sidewalks become cycling lanes? There's just a bit of a context here. With the welcome increase in bicycle ridership, which has come, there's some concern about bikes, skateboards, and scooters being both on the sidewalks, but also in the pedestrian priority areas.
So as Peter mentioned in the presentation, the design of the street is such that there will be dedicated space for pedestrians only on each side of the street, and that in the center area is where pedestrians and folks walking and folks cycle can share the space. And with both design cues and a slight elevation change between the pedestrian priority and the dedicated pedestrian spaces, there will be both physical design cues, there will be some separation in terms of elevation, and there will also be furnishing zones separating the pedestrian priority areas from the dedicated sidewalk areas. So although there's no way to completely restrict people from not using those areas, we hope that people will use the areas respectfully and pick up on the design cues and the areas that they are supposed to be sharing the space, just as they do in other areas, you know, where we have fully raised sidewalks with barrier curbs, and other areas of the city where we have different types of streetscapes. Generally, when we do good design with good design cues, good physical separation, people understand how they're supposed to behave in a space and generally respect other people using the street.
Thanks, Joanna. And from an advanced question, and actually this is twofold. Also on the topic of cycling, why did you add a bike lane from College Street to Gerrard? The other question is, why isn't there a bike lane all the way from Queen to College?
I'll pass this one to Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. Add a bike lane from College to Gerrard. Quite simply, the street's wider on that section of Yonge Street than the rest of the corridor. So there's actually the room to provide the separate cycling facilities. Also on that northern section of the corridor, the bike lanes would also provide a connection to the existing cycling network on Gerrard Street. And we also have, excuse me, we are also predicting slightly higher vehicle volumes on this northern section between College and Gerrard due to the connectivity to the north. So that makes a separate facility more appropriate on that particular block. So the second question is, why didn't we provide the cycle lane all the way through? Well, the first thing to say is that it is possible to cycle the entire length of the corridor, College down to Queen Street, but south of Gerrard, the corridor width is actually narrower. We've only got 20 metres frontage to frontage, and that space is being prioritised for pedestrians during the day and for the night bus and subway shuttle bus overnight. We've also got high volumes of pedestrians south of Gerrard Street, number of tourism sites and special events that go on there. And so having the high volume separated cycling facility through this busy pedestrian area could cause challenges for people walking and cycling. I mean, just to finish on this, that we are recommending this separated high volume cycling facility on University Avenue from College Street to Adelaide Street.
Thanks, Andy. And just, Liz, before we go to taking a couple of more live questions, let's go to another advanced question. This is business and economics. Won't reducing driving on Yonge Street impact the success of businesses?
Okay, so we've done a lot of research about how improving streets for walking and people cycling, people walking, how that influences business. And studies from across the UK, USA, and even here in Toronto indicate that people walking and people cycling visit retail streets more often and tend to spend more per month than those who are driving. And case studies also show that when we reduce driving lanes to improve a street for walking, for people walking and people cycling, and improve the experience, it tends to attract more visitors to those retail streets to walk, to shop, to dine, and that's in general helps bring in more retail sales, helps increase store vacancy rate or decrease the vacancy rates in storefronts. And so in general, what we're finding is that when we invest in the experience of walking and cycling on main streets or retail streets, it tends to be good for the economic health of a neighborhood.
Thanks, Joanna. Liz, do you want to take, I can provide another advanced question and then we can roll over to live questions if that works for you.
Yeah, that's fine. We have a few live questions coming in, so
okay. So what about one more? How do deliveries happen in pedestrian priority zones? This is also connected to businesses.
Yeah, sure. Zones, there are three ways. The majority of businesses and properties have rear loading docks and laneways, so they don't need to undertake that activity actually from Yonge Street. But where properties don't have that facility or don't wish to use it, we do have curbside activity zones on side streets that are in close proximity to the pedestrian priority zones. And then, of course, the pedestrian priority zones do open up overnight, so there is the opportunity to carry out servicing during the overnight hours when the pedestrian priority zones are open to all traffic.
That's great. Thank you. Liz, why don't we flip to some live questions now?
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to remind folks, if you've already asked a question, to lower your hand by clicking the hand icon. If you're on the phone, to raise your hand, you can press *3. As well, if you do have a question and you want to ask it live, to raise your hand, press the hand icon. So I'm going to go to Hayden. Hayden, you've been waiting patiently with your hand up, so I'm going to unmute you now so you can ask your question. Hayden.
Yes, hello. I'm a student at YongeTOmorrow University. So basically, before COVID, I usually walk to Union Station. So I noticed there, just north of Queen Street, there is a subway entrance, a stair subway entrance on the sidewalk, and it basically limits like the sidewalk space to like less than 4 meters. And on your design, you have trees on the other side, which is kind of blocking like sidewalk access actually. So I would suggest that if you look at the road plan to remove those trees that directly adjacent to this staircase to the subway.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hayden.
Okay, thanks for that comment. We'll have to have a look at the role plan and we'll consider that. Thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to go over to Julianne. Julianne, I'm going to unmute you to ask your question.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to ask about the winter time and specifically if the bike lanes will be maintained, especially what happens in the pedestrian priority blocks, if those will be maintained as well, so there's a consistent clear path for cyclists throughout the entire way.
So operations and maintenance, the details of operations and maintenance plans will be discussed in more detail in the next phase of design once we've established what the preferred design concept is. But for sure, any new cycle tracks or sidewalks that are introduced will receive the same level of maintenance, the same maintenance standards that all of our facilities have across the city. These facilities would have that as well.
Okay, thanks so much, Joanna. Magosha, you good if I go to another live question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. This will be a question from Dave S. Dave S., you've been patiently waiting with your hand up, so I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of the work on this project and this opportunity for us to become informed and ask our questions. And also, if everyone in the world ran a Zoom meeting like you folks did, it would be an amazing place. I really like the ideas here, and I really like how Yonge would be transformed. My concern is the effect on Church. I live between Church and Jarvis Street, and we know all the things that have happened on Jarvis Street over the years. And I'm kind of concerned about the impact on pedestrians and cyclists on Church. I was wondering if the if the traffic modeling that was done shows what the increase in volume of traffic on Church Street is in this alternative compared to 4B where there was maintained 2 ways motor vehicle traffic on Yonge.
Okay,
Great. Thanks for your question, Steve.
I'll have to pass this one to Andy.
Yeah, and apologies. That's a difficult one to answer without having the detail. And is it possibly something that we could make a note of and get back to you on? I mean, certainly the traffic volumes on Church will change as a result of the proposals across the 3 options A, B, and C, but I can't actually give you the numbers tonight on the difference between 4B and 4C.
Okay, great. So perhaps we can get that answer and include it in the meeting summary as well, to make sure we've got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. Magosha, yeah?
Let's question panel, because I feel like there's a lot we've got to try and get through. So how about just right from the top, something that came in earlier, how does Yonge Street function in the event of an emergency, in parentheses, not the scheduled subway closures? I think this might be a security and safety question. Joanna?
Sure. So Toronto Police, paramedic services, and fire services have all been participating with us in our technical advisory committee and working with us on figuring out the details for pedestrian priority zones. And so we've been working with them on things like the curb details, the width of the road, how the gates, how wide the gates are, and things like that. And so we've determined ways that they can still get into the pedestrian priority zones and address emergencies as they need to. So they will have the ability to come into a pedestrian priority zone, go around the gates, or mount the mountable curbs and get where they need to go in order to make sure that people are kept safe along Yonge Street.
Great, thanks. On to the next question. When is it anticipated round 2 of the EA from College to Davenport will go ahead?
Right. So as mentioned before, we're looking to submit a recommendation to Infrastructure and Environment Committee and Council in December. And then once a decision is made, that would go to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks for 30-day reporting period. So if that process all goes smoothly, then sometime in early 2021, we would be looking to start developing the scope of work to put together a design team to start on the second phase from Davenport to College. And so the design study typically takes at least 18 months. And so we're looking at, somewhere in the 2021 to 2023 time range for the northern section of Yonge Street.
Okay, and Liz, if you don't mind, how about one more question from the question panel?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, why not combine, so this is going back to the designs, why not combine 2 options for the whole area? Do all like College to Gerrard, 2-way driving with 2-way cycle tracks, wide sidewalks to be used Monday to Friday, make an easy transition, all to be from Friday at 7 p.m. to Sunday at midnight for a pedestrian priority area?
Sorry, Magosha, you'll have to repeat that for me.
Okay, so basically, why not combine 2 options? So I think we're going back to having a 2-way street for the full length. My apologies, Gil, if I'm not getting this correct. Do the whole design like we are for College and Gerrard. So we've got northbound traffic, southbound traffic, cycle tracks, wide sidewalks, do that for the full length, right? so that it's an easier transition and we don't have, I guess, the different designs that Peter was speaking to earlier in the presentation.
Oh, okay. So that basically goes back to what Andy was talking about, about how south of Girard, the right of way is much narrower, and we simply just don't have the space to provide an adequately sized facility for enough space for people walking, enough space for people cycling, and space for the night buses and shuttles as well. So to fit all three of those things together and have adequately sized facilities, it doesn't fit within 20 meters. And there's also the challenge of a high volume cycling facility being mixed with high volume pedestrian tourism areas, which can be a negative experience for both people walking and people cycling.
That's great. Thanks, Joanna.
Magosha, I think you can go to another question in the question panel because there are quite a lot coming in there. We do have some hands up, which we can get to in a minute, but I think why don't you just ask another one?
Okay. Let me just scroll back up here for a moment. Bear with me. Okay. Next one, how many people participated in the surveys for the options throughout the previous public events? Speaking, guess about round 1 and round 2.
So we had about 3,000 in round 1 and about 3,000 in round 2 for the online surveys.
Okay, moving along. Open streets, active TO, cafe TO, curb TO. For how long will each of these projects continue? If Yonge Street changes are made, will it be part of active TO or open streets, or is it YongeTOmorrow?
So first, I'll just clarify by saying that the YongeTOmorrow EA is separate. It's a separate initiative, it's a separate study under the Municipal Environmental Assessment Act. And in terms of the active TO, cafe TO, curb TO programs, those are separate programs, and I'll let Jacqueline speak to those about the timing and the authorities that have been granted by council for those specific programs.
Thanks, Joanna. The active TO, curb TO, and cafe TO programs are pandemic responsive programs that the city created just over the last few months. Curb TO is currently wrapping up. It was really about phase 1 of the pandemic when we were looking for more queuing space outside of businesses that were open during that time, namely the pharmacies and grocery stores and that kind of thing. The Cafe TO program is wrapping up around the 15th of November. We'll have a little bit more patio season ahead of us with heaters now being allowed. And the active TO program is a little bit more complex because we have the quiet streets element, the major road closures, as well as the cycling network expansion as part of active TO. And all of those have different phased down components. Quiet street will be phased down over the fall to allow for winter maintenance to continue. The major road closures are continuing through the next couple of weeks and then will be phased down for the winter. The cycling network expansions as part of active TO will continue over the winter into spring and summer of 2021, and staff will be reporting back to council on if those routes should be made permanent in the fall of 2021. You may also be aware that just yesterday, or actually Monday, excuse me, the mayor issued a letter to staff to evaluate the lessons learned from all 3 of those great programs which have made our city come to life in spite of the pandemic. And we'll be reporting back to council in January on lessons learned from those programs and how do we modify and expand those programs in 2021. So I hope that helps clarify. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Do we want to keep moving the panel?
Well, I've got a call-in user or a call-in. If I could go to that, Magosha, that'd be great. Yep. Okay, so for the call-in, it's the phone number is first 3 digits 515. So I'm going to unmute you. First 3 digits 515 to ask your question.
Hi. Hi, I'm wondering about the crossings, the street crossings. Often, especially for seniors and people with disabilities, just, we don't cross the street as fast. How can we ensure all the crossings, especially with cycle lanes? Sometimes cyclists don't really follow the traffic rules, especially what do you call it? For blind people, we have to press the button, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. How will all that be improved so that crossings are safer and adequate time is given, and also that what do you call it? Signal audio pedestrian signal, that button thing, finding the button, having it, it's all very not quite good, and it's hard to maintain. Anything looking into that kind of thing? Street crossing. Thank you.
Yeah. So as part of this project, we're working with our colleagues in Vision Zero to upgrade and make sure that YongeTOmorrow is in alignment with all of the Vision Zero principles. And some of the great thing about the concept is what it will do is it will significantly reduce the crossing distances at all the intersections, because you'll have 2 less lanes of traffic to cross. So that's a big improvement for any vulnerable road users trying to cross the street. Will also help with reductions of curb radii. And as we get into the next phase of design, once we have a recommended design concept chosen, we'll go into more details about how intersections operate, how signals operate, things like that. And we'll be working with our colleagues in Vision Zero safety projects. And the other great thing is when we do a road reconstruction like this, any old infrastructure gets upgraded to the new infrastructure. So the signals get upgraded to the newest signals. All of the audible, all of the accessible elements will be incorporated as we do the renewal of all of this infrastructure. So it's really a good news story when it comes to road safety for vulnerable users.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joanna. Magosha, if you're good, I'm going to go to another hand up, and then we can go back to the question list.
Sure,
okay,
sounds good.
Alan, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to first of all thank all of the designers for juggling all of these very tough concerns. I'd like to understand a little bit about why those 2 blocks with one-way access were chosen for driving. I really appreciate the pedestrian-only access in the other blocks, but just why those 2? Why one way there?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the blocks from Shooter Street to Dundas Square, there are a few things at play there. So we've got a bunch of major entertainment facilities on that block, as well as we've got a major parking garage underneath Dundas Square that's accessed off Dundas Street, as well as we gathered ride hailing data to understand where people hail rides in the city, and we've got the Mirvish Theater there as well. So all of those components combined indicated to us that it made sense to provide one-way access northbound from Shooter to Dundas Square to accommodate for all of those activities. We have a similar scenario up in the northern blocks from Walton Street to Gerrard Street, where in the future Walton Street is going to be opened up. There's going to be a large development on the just northwest of the corner of Walton and Yonge. And so we want to facilitate access across Walton and north on Yonge so that, again, ride hailing, pickup drop-offs, deliveries, all of those types of things can be accommodated on that particular block. If we had the one way going the other way, going southbound, then we're just directing people towards the pedestrian priority zones, which is not something we want to do. We want to move the traffic away from the pedestrian priority areas and back out into the street network and still provide that access for the businesses on those blocks.
Great, thanks, Joanna. Okay, Magosha, back to you for the Q&A list.
Sure. Actually, let's go to the advanced question list. On the topic of well-being, question 1, how will you address homelessness in the area? Question 2, to clean up discarded needles?
Okay, so this is a transportation study, and it won't recommend solutions to address homelessness, but our colleagues in shelter support and housing services, as well as in public health, they're part of our technical advisory committee, and they've been working with us. And so what they've been doing is giving us advice on how the street design can influence those people experiencing homelessness and also influence behavior on the street. And so they're giving us advice on what we can do through transportation design and how that impacts people experiencing homelessness and other activities happening on the street. When it comes to things like discarded needles, that's an operations and a maintenance issue. And as I discussed, we'll be going into more detailed assessment of strategies for operations, strategies for programming when we get into the detailed design component. And that's something that we've heard a lot from stakeholders, is that we should be looking into strategies for enhanced operations and maintenance in particular areas around Yonge and Dundas Square. So that's something we will be looking into in the next phase of design.
Councillor, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for that question. I actually think that it's impossible for us to build a globally competitive international downtown without it being prosperous and inclusive for everyone, and that means safe and inclusivity for all. And the issues that you raise are critical, not just for this area of the city, but right across the city. We're gripped with a housing crisis. We're in the middle of an opiate crisis that's actually gripped cities across Canada, including the downtown. So I know that this is of the greatest importance, not just to myself, but to the mayor to address. And there has to be some solutions in the short term, the immediate term, as well as the long term. The Yonge Street project is about looking ahead into the future. Obviously, it's not going to be constructed tomorrow. But in the meantime, while there is effort underway to address the immediate operational concerns and challenges for the area, this project is a bit more forward-facing over the next 50 or 75 years. What would that street look like? I'm hoping, and it is my absolute intention to work as hard as I can with the different stakeholders in the area to make sure that we can address some of those concerns which are immediate today, but is not necessarily a transportation-related matter. And you will have my commitment as well as the commitment of the BIA, the residents associations, Ryerson University. Everybody is quite concerned about the conditions today, and we are working hard at various stakeholder tables to address those conditions, to bring more resources to bear to the downtown east. Just very quickly, and I'll finish on this note, right now we have enhanced cleaning as well as operational services that no other part of the city has. And that's largely because some of the additional volume and activity because of the generated pedestrian activity, but also some of the social harm that we're seeing. And I anticipate that in the 2021 budget, we will be working with the deputy city manager and the city manager to enhance that even further, because we recognize that the first efforts haven't gone far enough, and we haven't seen the good results that we're hoping for. And as far as I know, not a single person is walking away from the area. They want to make it better. And as a resident who lives downtown, I've got a 15-month-old baby. I push my stroller across Yonge Street all the time. It is personal, and I want to make sure that I can continue to live downtown, just like all of you, but also my child and my family. We plan to grow downtown. So that's something that's critically important, not just as a city councillor, but as a resident of the downtown core. But I'll also be happy to connect with you further if you want to reach out to my office. I won't be able to go through all that is happening, but there is a significant amount that I'm happy to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess there's another question submitted in advance as well. I'll go back to the question panel next, but have public washrooms been planned or considered as part of this project? The need for washrooms has become more apparent with businesses closed and social distancing measures in place.
So that's something that the project team hadn't previously considered, but it had come up quite recently with our stakeholder advisory group. And so right now staff are invested and the project team were investigating if there are any feasible solutions to address the lack of public washrooms in the downtown core. And it's just something that we're looking into and to include in a recommendation to City Council. So we're investigating.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. So over to the question panel, just for a couple of them, and then Liz, we'll see. Do you see any hands up right now that we need to get to?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's try and get through as many as we can.
Got it.
Okay.
Let's do this. Will trees in the middle, are they going to be removed? And I think this is for the trees that are north of Gerrard up to Carlton, Joanna.
Yes, so interestingly enough, there is another project. So the TTC is doing renovations to College Station. And in order for them to do the concourse reconstruction for College Station, they have to do a big excavation at the road there. And so those trees have to be removed to facilitate that construction. And so we've been working with TTC as well as Urban Forestry to figure out where is the best place to accommodate to replace those trees on Yonge Street. And if we can't find places for those street, where can we also work with urban forestry to provide also cash in lieu and planting in other areas in the downtown core? And maybe Peter, you can speak a little bit more about the tree planting strategy for Yonge Street.
Hi, yeah. Well, on the tree planting, the aim is really to provide trees for shade and shelter and also for wildlife along particular sections of the street to break up long views and to provide enclosed spaces. One of our main challenges with street tree planting in Yonge Street are the large amount of services below ground. There's a host of services there that makes it very difficult to actually establish trees, and therefore we need to focus on finding those available spots along the street that not only allow routes to develop but also don't implicate or impact on pedestrian movement.
Great, thanks, Peter.
Okay, back over to the question panel. There's a couple of earlier questions that wanted confirmation about physical barriers for the cycle tracks. But I'm also going to, I think that that's been addressed. The other question that comes up is, it looks like cycling is only going one direction, zones. Can you clarify that, please?
No, cycling is allowed in both directions for the entire stretch of Yonge Street. May just be the graphic where we're showing on the one-way blocks that cyclists can ride, that lane will be available because there won't be any cars coming in the opposing direction. So that lane is essentially there just for cyclists during the daytime. But two-way travel is allowed on all blocks between Queen and College.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to another one from the question panel. Looks like this might be more clarification. The diagrams and renderings show one gate at each end of the pedestrian only zone. Has the city considered putting gates on both curbs to help enforce the pedestrian zone? I can see some drivers being tempted to swerve around the gates.
This is true. We've had a lot of discussion about this, but part of the reason for only providing gates on one side of the street is our conversations with our colleagues in emergency services, our colleagues in fire services, in police, and also in our paramedics. So having a gate across half of the road provides that visual deterrent for drivers, and we hope that people don't decide to just go around them. But in the event that there is emergency, those emergency services can go around and get to where they need to go. Similar to most one-way streets in the downtown core, we don't have gates blocking them off. We simply trust that drivers just don't drive down them the wrong way.
Great, thanks, Joanna. And Liz, what about one more from the panel? And then we
Yeah,
can go to
so
a live
I
question.
was actually just going to say there are no more hands up. I think people have put their hands down, so we're good just to do the questions panel. We've probably got time for 2 or 3 more, so go ahead,
Okay.
Magosha.
Great. And again, just for everybody tuning in, I'm going to go back and forth between both the question panel, but also the advanced list. There were quite a lot of questions that people took the time to get to us before our meeting started tonight. So I see that loading zones have been indicated throughout the design concepts, but not on the east side of Yonge Street between Dundas Street and Dundas Square Street. This is the only driveway loading zone onto Yonge Dundas Square. So this is a site-specific one.
Could you repeat that, Magosha?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So I see that loading zones have been indicated throughout the design concepts, but not on the east side of Yonge Street between Dundas Square and Dundas Square Street. So what are the plans here?
So
this is the only driveway loading on. So this is about access to Yonge Dundas Square, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Yonge Dundas Square is also on our technical advisory committee, and they're a city agency. And so in order for Dundas Square to load special events and whatnot, they will have some special accommodations to get events in and out of the square. And so we'll be working with them as a city agency to establish the operations and maintenance requirements for them to put on the events that they need to put on as part of Dundas Square, because that's part of why the pedestrian priority zones have been placed at in that zone, is because of the number of events that go on in the square.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to flip back to the advanced list and talk about transit. 2 questions. Can cars and trucks drive in the pedestrian priority zones overnight? We've touched on this. Number 2, are any upgrades planned to TTC stations?
Okay, so I think Andy and Peter both talked about, yes, cars and trucks can be in the pedestrian priority zones overnight from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. In terms of, so the second question was, are upgrades planned to TTC stations? So, so the Toronto Transit Commission is a separate city agency, and it has its own budget and capital plans. And so again, we are working very closely with the Toronto Transit Commission on their long-term plans for upgrading their stations at College, at Queen, at Dundas. But this project, you know, we cannot make changes to subway infrastructure. This project won't be making recommendations, but we are working with them to understand how we can coordinate our 2 capital plans and how we can best work together and find efficiencies and coordinate our works.
Okay, thanks. Now back over to the question panel. My question is, given construction is not expected until at least 2023, will there be an opportunity to do a pilot of YongeTOmorrow before construction?
There is the possibility, but that's something that City Council really needs to determine. So when we bring our recommendation to City Council, there may be a discussion about a potential pilot, and City Council will direct staff on whether a pilot is a viable option. And Jacqueline, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Thanks, Joanna. I think the only thing I would add is that those who've been familiar with the evolution of Yonge Street know that that changes to the design and operation of Yonge Street have been piloted before. So it certainly would stand to reason that council may want to try pilots on Yonge Street again.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jacqueline. Next question. Please comment on the longevity versus cost of the paving stones that will be installed instead of asphalt. Why were paving stones / bricks chosen?
So paving stones and asphalt have similar longevity when they are installed correctly on the proper base materials. And part of the reason that the design team has selected unit paving is because unit paving indicates to all, people walking, people cycling, people driving, this is a special area that is meant for pedestrians, and it's a special area for people to enjoy and experience. And Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything else about the selection of unit pavers and the materiality for Yonge Street.
Hi there, Jeff. Thank you, Jonah. I think the fundamental thing is it is about changing the character of the street so it no longer looks like a roadway. That's fundamental. And then in terms of the material, that will be developed in a lot more detail at the next design stage when we look at things like skid resistance, slip resistance, etc. on the actual paving stones to make sure that people can walk and ride safely across them. Also, Joanna mentioned the subbase. The subbase is critically important to get that right in order to maintain the integrity of the paving. But I think by giving it that kind of unit paving feel, you're kind of making it a pedestrian priority area into which vehicles are allowed to travel at times, and they're invited into that space.
Great, thanks, Peter.
Magosha, I'm just going to jump in and do a time check. So we've got a couple minutes left before our schedule close. I think we should do a couple questions, though, and we may go a couple minutes over, if that's okay, just because I think we've got some additional questions. So just to keep passing it over to you to read a couple more questions before we close.
Sure. And again, there are some fantastic amount of questions that we've received in those different avenues, and they will be answered in a summary report. And I'm just really impressed with the time people have taken to provide their input. So going on, I am curious whether there was a consideration of path, which might be outside of the project scope, as the Eaton Center is the north end of path. As of right now, it seems like the project would work almost like the extension of path at ground level.
That's an interesting insight. So the project team really hasn't talked much about the path because within the focus area there isn't an underground path system. But that's an interesting comment. Thank you.
Okay. Next, has traffic calming been considered for the smaller streets around Yonge, which will absorb car traffic? Some already see high car volumes and very unsafe driving. We've got in parentheses, Shooter and Victoria especially. Can policy be worked in to absorb the impact?
So as we get into the detailed design in the next stages, we will be looking at the transitions from Yonge Street to all of the side streets. And, there is, as Andy and Peter both talked about some of the curbside activity zones that are being added on some of the side streets, which will provide a different dynamic. But what I can say is that we will continue to look at the operations of those streets and the traffic modeling and how Yonge Street, how they all fit together. So the intent is to have a seamless transition between the side streets and Yonge Street.
Great. Can I provide another one?
Sure.
I don't want to see the same thing that happened at Waterfront happen here on Yonge. People bike on the sidewalk all the time because they don't see the bike lane because it looks the same. Okay, so there's not a question there, there's a comment.
Okay, thank you.
A technical question. How will cars get onto Walton Street given the northbound restriction on Yonge Street? It's not clear to me, but from looking at the maps.
Andy, can you explain the circulation onto Walton Street?
Yeah, sure. So I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, the question is relating to the current access for Walton Street, which is in and out from Yonge Street. what we're showing on the plans is a future scenario where the development's built out and you'll actually be able to make access through to Walton Street from Bay Street, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Andy. We've got another site specific one. Since car driving will be limited north of Shooter, there will be more drive onto Shooter. There are already problems on Shooter with car drivers parking in the bike lane and very little enforcement. How are we going to deal with Shooter?
So in terms of travel patterns, only those cars, only drivers who proceed north of Queen onto Yonge Street would then be making a turn onto Shooter Street. We have been looking at Shooter Street as well as the intersection of Shooter and Yonge Street to try and optimize the traffic operations and traffic behavior, as well as looking at ways to improve the delineation of the cycling infrastructure on Shooter Street. So as we move into the next phase and we have a recommended design concept selected, we'll continue to do optimization of intersections and optimization of design details to deal with some of the operational challenges that some of our stakeholders have brought up.
Great, thanks, Joanna. I think we've got another comment here. It seems like it's a personal thought about the importance of public education all around. In this respect, it's cycling etiquette is necessary as people have a different concept of cycling here than in other places around the world. Cyclists race along the street, which not only makes it hard for, I guess, pedestrians, but also bike users feel unsafe. So again, if about the education involved in the design.
So with any new street design comes a period of educating people about how to use the new street design, and that will come with this project as well. And it takes time for people to get used to new designs, become accustomed, become familiar. And there is some cultural change as we begin to develop new types of streets, new street typologies. People need a bit of time to adapt and change, and the culture of street use changes. And we've seen that over the last 6 months with COVID-19. People have learned how to use streets differently. There's been education, people have changed, people adapted, and that's what we expect to see on any street when we implement changes.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. I'm ready to, well, I mean, we're not going to get through this list. Yeah.
So I just wanted to do a time check. We're just over 8. We still have lots of folks on, but some people are dropping off. So why don't we just take a couple more? Maybe can we do 2 and then say we'll close it? Okay, just because there's so many.
For sure.
Thanks.
So this is somebody else responding to a question that we tried to answer. You missed half of Gil's question. We wanted to know why not open to traffic Monday and Friday and close to pedestrians for the weekends.
So pedestrian priorities based on time rather than based on blocks. It sounds like that's the question. So that is a potential, something that could be considered. Some other stakeholders have brought up the ideas of phased implementation. The challenge that we have with the data is that weekdays are some of the highest pedestrian volumes in the focus area. So we see really high pedestrian volumes every day, especially during, lunch hours when lots of people work and shop and live in the neighborhood. So it's not like some other areas of the city where it's only busy with pedestrians on weekends. The pedestrians are there all days of the week. And so that's why the design team has recommended that the pedestrian priority zones be in effect through the week and not just on weekends. But there are discussions about, that may be a discussion that we have with City Council about different timing and different operations.
Okay, and last one here.
Yep.
By cargo bikes, as in European cities, been considered, like in Amsterdam and Copenhagen. So any thought to cargo bikes?
So as I understand, cargo bikes are already being piloted by a number of the delivery companies in the core. And so we welcome that use. And I don't know if Jacqueline has any other information about the cargo bikes being used, but that's definitely a use that's very compatible with the YongeTOmorrow design recommendations.
Thanks, Joanna. I can just add that the city has recently made some changes to the regulatory framework to make it clear that heavier cargo bikes are legal to be used on the roads and in cycle tracks. And so we certainly encourage their use. And I know some delivery companies, both your sort of standard large delivery companies as well as smaller organizations, are using cargo bikes in our city, and that's great.
Okay, great. I think that we've got to close for our questions, although we do have lots more, and as we promised, we will work to provide responses to all of them in the summary report so that you have answers to them, and we have them all here. As I mentioned, we will be writing a report based on this conversation as well as what we receive between now and September 30th and the questionnaire. And this meeting was recorded, so you can actually watch it again or share it with folks who weren't able to attend. Joanna, perhaps you can just bring up the slide deck again. Great.
Bear with me here 1 second.
Yep. Either way, I think we just want to thank everyone for attending tonight, as well as all the other meetings that we've been having for YongeTOmorrow. As I mentioned, this is the third public meeting, and it was amazing to see how many people logged on. So if you have further comments or questions, Joanna's just going to move it to the last slide, but you can contact Magosha, who you met either this evening or before, at YongeTOmorrow at toronto.ca, as well as on our website, toronto.ca /YongeTOmorrow. Joanna, I don't know if you had any closing words that you wanted to say to folks tonight before we close the meeting.
No, I just really want to thank everyone who's participated in the project so far. We've received a lot of engagement from so many people. As I said, we've had 6,000 survey responses so far. But please get all your friends and everyone you know. Get everyone to do the online questionnaire, visit the website and tell us what you think, because that's what we need is more opinions to tell us what the right recommendation is for Yonge Street, so we can give City Council a really strong recommendation in December that reflects what the people of Toronto want for Yonge Street.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much to the team and all the participants and Councillor Wong Tam as well. I would say safe home, but you're probably already there. But it's been an absolute pleasure tonight. And again, till September 30th, and contact Magosha if you have any additional questions. We have the Q&A, and we will be ensuring we'll get to the questions we didn't get to tonight. So with that, have a good evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.